Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Greg Martin. Greg, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. I've been following you and your team for quite a bit here. But for folks that don't know you and what your team is up to, can you tell us a bit about your background as well as Ghost Security?
Yeah, happy to. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Ghost Security. We are a AppSec startup that is applying Agentic AI to help reach an end goal of autonomous AppSec. And we've been at it for 2 years, and really exciting stuff that we're excited to talk about on this podcast. My background, I've been a founder and cybersecurity practitioner for, I don't want to admit how long. I'm probably most well known for being the founder of the company Anomaly in the threat intel space. And then after that, I started a company called Jask, which got acquired by Sumo Logic. And yeah, now we're on to Ghost.
Very cool. So before we dive into, kind of Ghost and AppSec and Agentic AI and all these fun topics, now that you say that, I'm curious, having been down this journey before, what made you jump back in, rather than go the advisory route or get into venture or do those other, kind of activities? What made you say, hey, I want to go back and be an operational kind of founder again?
Yeah, glutton for punishment, maybe. I think I just love to build. I love to build teams. I love to build culture, and love to build technology and innovation. And one of the things that attracted us to the AppSec problem, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but we saw that there was a huge lack in innovation in AppSec. With a lot of the tools that have been out for literally decades, were still kind of the state-of-the-art tools that everybody used. And those tools were, largely using very old school techniques, and they were designed in an age where technology IT looked very different, right? We were all running data centers and behind firewalls and such, and things have changed a lot since then. So we really needed to modernize the stack to protect today's apps. So we saw a huge opportunity to work in AppSec, even though it's a new space for me.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of impressive that you're diving into this, this domain of cybersecurity, given that you said you didn't have a background in it. But I think we're always welcoming new ideas, new innovative ways of doing things. So I'm excited to hear what you guys are up to. And speaking of which, you have a pretty, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but a unique perspective, based on the trend and hype around AI and agentic AI. Do you feel that there's too much hype, not enough hype? What's your perspective here on this?
That's a great question. So, I'm sure that everybody thinks, including me, that the agentic AI thing is at a fever pitch right now. And I'll just kind of hit the elephant in the room. Cybersecurity folks, myself included, are kind of skeptical by nature, right? We look at new things, especially very loudly hyped things, with a lot of disbelief. And really, that's what led myself and some of my team members down the road of deep diving into AI, and specifically agentic AI, about 9 months ago. We want to know, is there something here? And what we found was that it's really early, and that it's accelerating on an innovation curve or path like nothing we've seen before in our careers. And that got us very excited and kind of hooked, if you will. And we've been kind of deep into it ever since. And so what I've learned, and I guess you could say I've become like the most unlikely expert in this space now. I've learned that, in some ways it is overhyped. In terms of its enterprise readiness and how easy it is to make this stuff into real production ready, repeatable processes that do something valuable for the business. And in some ways, I think it's underhyped. I do believe that this technology will transform and disrupt just about every technology or software industry, cybersecurity included, in a very positive way. And I think that, an example of overhyped that I hear a lot, I'm sure you hear this too, Chris, is that software engineers are going to go away. and we're going to replace them with, auto coding AI agents, and that one person or 3-person startups can create like $1 billion startup by using AI. Yeah, I think obviously that's overhype, and software engineers are definitely going to be around for the long haul. I will say that, they better start using AI tools sooner rather than later, because I think that's going to be their kind of biggest threat, is a software engineer that knows how to use and leverage these AI codes as a force multiplier versus an engineer that's like, no, I'm not jumping on the AI bandwagon. I think those are the ones that may be in trouble.
Yeah, I think a few things you said there I want to highlight is, one is, you talked about how security by nature is very skeptical and reluctant to embrace new technologies and things like that. And I saw this a lot myself with cloud. And ironically enough, like the people who kind of sat back and were skeptical and reluctant, whether it's organizations or individuals, now had to play catch up, right? Like their peers already off using the technology. Now you got to try to catch up and build confidence and proficiency with it. And I think we're going to see the same thing with AI. People who kind of are reluctant and skeptical and too risk averse are going to be kind of late to the party. And I think that, I take your approach, which is kind of dive in, learn, experiment. What is this thing here? Like, how's it going to be used? What changes will it drive? That helps me better understand how I can secure it versus just sitting back, thinking about all the things that can go wrong. And then I will say, like the software engineering piece, it doesn't help that, the CEO, I think it was, of NVIDIA said like, hey, don't teach your kids to code. And then like the latest news, I think it was yesterday, was Salesforce. Yeah, Salesforce yesterday said like they're not hiring any software engineers or developers in 2025 or something like that.
Sure.
And I think there's a bit more nuance to it. Obviously there's some marketing play there, given they're all in on agents and stuff like that. But there is some nuance to it in the sense that it's like, I think there's a saying now catching hold that's like, not AI is not going to take your job, but someone using AI is going to take your job. And I think that that's much more realistic or practical take on it. So I'm curious, given that you dove in here and started focusing on AppSec, what makes you think AppSec in particular is such a good, well-suited use case for this technology for AI or agentic AI?
Yeah, well, I think that AppSec needed an upgrade regardless, right? There's a huge issue that we identified in AppSec where most organizations have one or many or no AppSec engineers on their team, and they may have tens or hundreds of developers, right? So the skew to people with subject matter domain expertise that can help identify and protect these apps, and the people that are creating the apps, there's just like a huge off balance of resourcing there. So that's problem number one. And any technology that can drive leverage and automation, which I think that's the promise of agentic AI, I think can have a huge benefit in those types of scenarios. When it comes to the technology behind it, is AppSec well suited for these AI models? Absolutely, right? The LLMs themselves are kind of trained on text and trained on a lot of text that has programming and cybersecurity knowledge, and they can be fine-tuned and they can be improved with things like RAG techniques. So in a lot of different areas, like I'll give you an example like SaaS, like looking at source code, finding vulnerabilities. I think off the shelf agentic AI and these LLM models are going to be highly effective and highly disruptive to kind of the old templatized kind of rules-based approach that we used for SaaS previously. And if you extrapolate from there, what are the other challenges that AppSec people do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's looking at runtime risk from their apps themselves and the app's logs. There's huge opportunities for getting that leverage and that automation, and that's what we're so excited about.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of unique aspects of AppSec that will be well suited for this technology. I think I just saw that in 2024 we hit 40,000 CVEs, number of known vulnerabilities, and obviously that's being driven by factors like more code, more attack surface, more applications, the more digitalization of the economy and business interactions. But I think we're going to see another factor is going to be the use of this technology to identify vulnerabilities and bring them to the awareness of the public, and granted, that number going up isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means we have visibility of vulnerabilities that we didn't have traditionally. which is a benefit to the community, assuming we actually act on them and remediate them, which is another conversation and another challenge that we have here due to, things you talked about, the workforce and tooling and things like that. So I'm curious, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but we've seen a lot of changes in AppSec of things like shift left and secure by design is the latest trend, trying to throw tools in the pipelines and things like that. But it's actually created a lot of challenges too in terms of noise and vulnerabilities without context, and backlogs just growing. Developers, starting to resent security for dumping spreadsheets on them full of vulnerabilities and things like that. When you look at the tooling space in AppSec, what are some of the biggest challenges you think you see, kind of out there right now?
Yeah, well, we talked about how some of the tools are really out of date. You look at Burp Suite as an example. That's one of the most popular, like commonly used AppSec tools. Burp Suite's over 10 years old. I think it's maybe 15 or more years old now. And you look at some of the other things, Zap Proxy from the open OWASP group, that is actually, I think, also 10 years old, and it spawned from Paros Proxy, which was even older than that. And of course, they've added a lot of features over time. Some people look at that as kind of feature bloat, and it's just kind of grown and grown and grown. But my point is that these tools still use the same kind of core underlying techniques, and they're designed with this kind of templatized approach on the DaaS side, on the SaaS side. With Burp, it's really designed for more humans taking a look and kind of iteratively running and testing these apps, and they're adding now some really interesting automation AI tools on top of it. We released our own kind of idea of that as open source called Reaper. But yeah, I think that my point I'm trying to make is that these tools are very old, and it's time for some new ideas. It's time to take a step back and say, look, we have this incredible new technology in front of us now. If we were to look at the problem set and start thinking about it from the ground up, first principles approach, how would we solve this problem today? How would we solve this problem knowing that things are likely running in the cloud, they're likely running in kind of containerized environments, they may be using a microservices architecture, they may be running in serverless infrastructure. The apps of today are very different than the monolithic data center based apps that we had a decade ago when these tools were built. So how would we do things differently? And how would we do things differently given the technology that we have today, like the LLM technology, Agentic AI? And when you start to ask yourself these questions, that's where I think the real innovation can start. And I envision a day that essentially, we have some of these agentic AIs checking every open source project in GitHub, finding the vulnerabilities automatically and submitting pull requests to the developers to review. And if somebody's not already doing that, I predict it's going to be happening very, very soon.
Yeah, I certainly hope so, especially given the rise of software supply chain attacks and targeting open source and the ecosystem itself. I do hope we see it go beyond just kind of giving alerts or notifications or heads up to the maintainers, but actually going to help them remediate these things too, because often these are unpaid volunteers who are sustaining these projects and these libraries and these components and things like that. But I think there's an opportunity for the technology not just to identify issues, but to help propose fixes and resolutions to the vulnerabilities and things like that too. Another thing we talked about a little bit ago here is that applications have become kind of a fundamental driver of modern day businesses. When we look at how we interact with customers, facilitate business operations, drive revenue growth, and things like that. Kind of coupled with various trends within cyber, whether it's zero trust or cloud or software as a service. Now AI. How do you see those converging factors kind of coming together to drive a further emphasis or importance of AppSec to businesses?
I think with what's been happening over the past, call it decade, with zero trust, the move to SaaS apps, really it's changed the dynamic of cybersecurity in a huge way. The risk surface is changed, obviously, and in some ways it's become maybe more simple. And less complex, you have the major cloud providers. They're taking on a lot of the security, but it really kind of raises the importance of a couple of key areas. One is the users themselves, and that includes their identity and so on, the data. The data sovereignty, the data privacy, the data integrity itself. And then the third would be apps. So, my worldview is those are kind of the key three most important things that we need to protect in this kind of new cloud-centric, SaaS-centric world. And if anything, it just makes application security so much more important. And, I want to call back to something earlier you said, is that the kind of divide between the developers and the AppSec and the kind of toil over, you just sent me a spreadsheet full of vulnerabilities. Well, it really comes down to what is the incentive model behind these individuals? How are they successful in their jobs? And developers' incentive model is not to be subject matter experts in security, right? Obviously, they care very deeply about making sure their code doesn't get hacked, but really they're incentivized by pushing their code out quick to the business and developing new features, gaining new customers. Security is often an afterthought for a lot of these folks, and maybe it's just not something that they've had the time to learn up on. And that's why it's really important to have, AppSec engineers and subject matter experts helping, protect this paradigm. But we have to realize that those incentives are not aligned, and we have to figure out a way that we can partner with the developers to make sure that we're not necessarily just becoming kind of the annoying roadblock to them. And I think that Agentic AI offers, and just this AI technology in general offers this opportunity to rethink, how do we develop controls? How do we develop systems that, meld into this dynamic better? So we're not just the kind of team of no, no, you can't push this code. No, you can't do that. We want to really be facilitators and helpers, educate when we can, and help add automation so they can continue to move fast while pushing secure code. And I think that's really going to be the key. Organizations that figure out how to get that right, and hopefully their AppSec teams become loved by their developers and not the other way around.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of resentment and frustration among development teams with security because they often feel like we are kind of burdening them with additional work. I always cite this study from Linux Foundation and Harvard that they went and interviewed a bunch of open source maintainers about cybersecurity, and the consensus was that it's a soul withering chore. And I was like, well, if that's how they feel, we got a steep climb ahead of us. And it's like, I feel you guys, I can relate to sometimes. But I think making the right thing to do, the easy thing, integrating with their workflows, giving them the right technologies to make it simpler in terms of addressing vulnerabilities and security concerns is going to go a long way, to your point. And to that note about automation and AI, what are some key aspects of leveraging AI and automation to kind of have the outcomes for the business that we're after, whether it's additional, deep context or things like that? What are some of these important factors?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I love that question. Context is everything, especially when you involve AI, machine learning, these models. It's all about the data. The more context you can give it, whether you're prompting, and making sure that context is high quality. Everybody's heard the adage about machine learning, like dirty data in, dirty data out. Well, that applies to this technology as well. And I'll give you a real world example of, an experience at Ghost. We were working with a large healthcare company, and, the individual customer reached out and they said, look, we spend hours and hours on these SAST report exception requests. So we get all these kind of found vulnerabilities from our SAST report. We're required to go back to our developers and report them, and then run a process where we essentially have to research and approve each of these. And a lot of times it's just a checkbox operation and we allow it through because they're like, oh, well, this isn't in production, or this is internal only, and this is why this is using this library. And it's just an incredibly time-consuming process. So what we were able to do is bring the runtime environment to that process and prototype an agent that essentially reads their SaaS report. I think in this case it was from SimGrep, so they just outputted the report. We processed it with our AI agent. We added all the context about their environment. Is this app in production? Is this app dealing with sensitive data? and all these types of factors. And what they were able to do is essentially kind of automate that exception process and essentially save the AppSec team countless hours per day or per week by automating that process. And that was just kind of like an early prototype that we did to experiment when we first started down this kind of agentic AI road. And the customer still loves it and uses it today. And we're like, well, this is just kind of a glimpse into what the future looks like and what's capable or possible, so to speak. And seeing those real results are exciting.
Yeah, definitely. It's a promising, kind of landscape ahead of us with this technology and addressing longstanding systemic challenges. I did want to say, on the other side of that, there's many who fear that, this technology is going to be used for nefarious purposes. We talk about vulnerability discovery, right? Like, reconnaissance in terms of scanning environments, getting context of the environment, architectures, et cetera, vulnerabilities within the environments. What is your perspective on how malicious actors might be and likely already are using this technology, and whether it'll help more than it hurts, or is it it depends on the customer, the organization, the team, the maturity, et cetera. What's your thoughts on how it'll be used for nefarious purposes as well?
Yeah, look, I'm not a FUD guy, but I do want to state that this is a pivotal time in cybersecurity where the promise that this technology offers as defenders and innovators and people working to protect these organizations, the same technology is available to the adversaries. And what we've been able to do in our own kind of research and lab, what other companies are doing to automate pen testing, to automate phishing attacks for education, you can bet that the adversaries are using the same technology and they're not using it for education. and I've personally seen a rise in very sophisticated phishing attacks that come through as DocuSign or UPS. This is a package, and they look extremely, extremely real. And this is a new phenomenon. I haven't seen these phishing attacks so sophisticated. So we got to be ready for this. And I think that is just going to increase at an alarming rate. So I think the first thing is don't throw your hands up and like, let's learn about it. Let's understand it. I think the folks that are working in threat intelligence will have to start tracking these types of campaigns and understanding the TTPs better of how the threat actors are leveraging AI against us. And there's a lot of protections baked into some of the frontier models. But the open source models are rising in capability so fast, and it's very easy for the community to remove the safety protections of those open source models. Once that happens, they're literally like high-powered weapons that can be used for just about anything. And again, I'm not trying to stir up fear here. I'm just stating the reality of the situation. And everybody needs to be educated and understand that you can get a very high quality kind of state-of-the-art level open model with no safety protections that can essentially be instructed to hack a website, do SQL injection, create phishing campaigns with full autonomy.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's similar to broader, kind of historical open source first commercial technologies, in the sense that one is a black box. We want visibility around weights and things like that. We maybe don't get that from the commercial provider, the transparency that some people want. But on the flip side of that, the open source stuff, it has software supply chain concerns. Who contributed to it? What did they do? What did they contribute to? How are they using it maliciously? And then the phishing piece. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm a CEO of a consulting company, and this morning I got a text from one of my teammates who said, "Hey, did you send this message over asking X, Y, and Z?" I'm like, "No, that's definitely not me," but it looked compelling. I'm like, "That's not me. Ignore it. Do not send them anything that they're asking for." So it's definitely going on, and people are using it to make more compelling, believable phishing campaigns for sure. So we've run the gamut, in terms of AppSec tools, legacy tools, modern tools, AI, agentic AI, its implications for AppSec. What's on the horizon for you and the team at Go Security? Where can folks learn more? What should we be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, a lot happening with us. We just released our newest version of our product that essentially spans, discovering all apps, APIs, and helping you surface the risk. We're now moving into source code capability to help you, connect and speed up the process of being able to identify risk across your source code to your running apps and APIs, and then automate some of the process of helping you, understand, are those risks real, and who are the developers responsible? How do we help them kind of address this risk? So that's essentially what Ghost does, in that vision of automating AppSec. So we can give our AppSec engineers some of their time back, and they can focus on the most kind of pressing and important issues. We have a lot planned this year. We're going to be releasing new open source software, new agentic AI tools. We're going to be opening up our product to not just the largest enterprises. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And we have a lot of fun at Ghost. We do a lot of crazy things. We have an off-road racing team, which I think is really unique for a cybersecurity company. And yeah, we're having a lot of fun with this. I would say if you're really interested in agentic AI and how it applies to cybersecurity, and you want to learn more, we're doing kind of collaborative learning sessions with the industry, and I'd encourage you to reach out, and we would meet that with open arms.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Greg, and all the kind of topics we covered. For folks that didn't catch it here in the video, you can check out ghostsecurity.com. Definitely give Greg and the team a follow on LinkedIn. They put some thought-provoking pieces out there that I've enjoyed and cited in the newsletter that I publish and so on. So thanks to everyone who tuned in, and thanks, Greg, for jumping on here with me.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right.